Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Hey, sorry about that. I couldn't get in on Skype to my own show.
Oh, I was kind of freaking out.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know. So now I'm on the phone. So I don't know what. There was a recording. I kept trying to get in, and the recording was, yeah. So anyway, I think we should be on, and I can't find the music, and Brian will be calling in shortly. So this is Progress Toward Democracy, and I'm Ruth Anna Martefield, and right here we have Brian Stetton. Hi, Brian.
Oh, hi. I was just calling your phone. Sorry.
Skype. I'm on the phone. Skype wouldn't let me in. They said that Blog Talk has its limit of Skype calls right now. And I kept trying, and I have never run into that. This was...
Anybody that wants to communicate to me through Facebook is out of luck. I'm blocked out of that for 3 days. Jason, are you there? Yes, I am.
Jason's here.
It's a pleasure. Yes, I was not able to answer you because I'm blocked. I just can watch you say what's going on and not be able to do anything.
Who did you make mad?
I don't know. I'm probably being punished for being a radical dissident or something.
Well, of course.
No idea what's going on with Facebook.
You probably said something pro-Palestinian.
Somebody reported you. Yeah, that's... So we were just saying good evening, everybody, and you can call us at 760-539-3207. Tonight, one of our topics will be, how does the far-left view of the news differ radically from the mainstream?
Well, you want to start by...
Go ahead. That's it. Go ahead.
Well, you want to start by going from the specific to the general? It has been a very interesting week in terms of news. In particular, for example, one economist that's kind of mainstream and gets quoted by the news periodically, Nouriel Roubini, who's considered a bit of a free market economist, and he sort of created a bit of buzz when he stated that he felt Karl Marx was right, capitalism may very well destroy itself. Recently stated that all the bankers probably should be hanged if they continue to loot society. Yeah. So, it just seems to be this massive crime wave with the financial elite. The financials do get 40% of the profits of the S&P 500. They're probably the most powerful of the elite, have accumulated the most wealth, and they're certainly extremely corrupt. And it's been one after the other.
Keep talking, Brian. I'm having problems, and we may lose... I don't know what's going on, but I'm having problems with the computer and Blog Talk. So we may be losing Jason. I'm not...
are you there, Jason? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I was wondering if you had any
hopefully
thoughts on it.
Audience
I guess most recently was the scandal regarding the fixing of LIBOR, the London Interbank Offer Exchange Rate, which was done, I guess, to enhance certain trades. But that affects a global market that's some $800 trillion in size, and criminal investigations are going on regarding that. Whether anybody goes to jail or not, who knows? There's been one, bad crime after another. With Jimmy Dimon doing a $2 billion directional bet on the market going bad, but claiming it was a mistaken hedge that went bad. He basically lied. During the whole financial crisis, they know that they packaged mortgages that were probably going to go bad, and they sold these securities, which internally, example in Goldman Sachs, they would describe this as shit that they were selling to their clients. And as they sold these collateralized debt obligations that consisted of bad mortgages, they would simultaneously short it and make money on it collapsing in value. There's the whole robo-signing scandal, which is basically fraudulent signing. I mean, all of these things, you know, I mean, we commit a minor crime, we go to jail for several months if you commit a minor burglary or something. And you hear, you know, billions, trillions of dollars, whatever. You know, it doesn't happen. A totally different set of laws applies to them because they effectively have a significant amount of control over our society.
Well, they've got the control, not just a significant. I mean, at this point, yeah.
Well, I guess if we talk about this in terms of a far left perspective, and it is major class warfare. It is actually it's the essence of the capitalist class. Well, no, have you been following the scandal, Jason?
Yeah, I have been following it, and I guess when I first heard about it, it was just a headline from Reuters, and it said Ligor scandal. And the last I heard, Ligor was an erectile dysfunction medication, so I didn't really get what it was right away. But when I started reading it and I realized what it was, I was thinking, oh, so somebody fixed the rates for a deal to get themselves more money. Oh, really? Yeah, of course. I mean, in terms of hyper greed, this is not unexpected at all. I mean, of course, this is going to happen. And whether or not somebody's really going to go to jail over this, I think really depends on who's getting the short end of the stick on this situation. If you look at all the bankers who did everything that they did during the bailouts and the collateralized debt obligations and the credit bubbles, nobody went to jail. That's because only poor people got ripped off.
Right.
Now, when Bernie Madoff went to jail, aside what he did was obviously a pyramid scheme.
Right.
And the thing was, he stole money from really, really rich people.
Right.
So when this whole Ligor thing does get investigated, and I have no doubt they really will investigate this, because I do believe that a lot of really rich people got screwed over on this. So there is going to be a real investigation, and depending on how powerful the people that got ripped off, that depends whether or not someone goes to jail. Being rich or being white can buy you a lot of immunity in the financial world, but it can't buy you all. It can't buy you all of it if you hurt enough people who have more power than you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's amazingly, bad, the whole situation. Well, with the LIBOR scandal, there's some questions as to why and so forth, and apparently why the regulators were complicit, because apparently they knew to an extent this was going on. But it was mainly for the sake of credit swap traders making a profit. But it impacted so much else, because just about every interest rate is based on LIBOR. So
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a great deal of bribes that were being handed out because of this. And one of the, this is also one of those things where this is an act of selfishness.
Right.
And capitalism is supposedly great by this virtue of selfishness. Although they always like to focus on that tiny little abstract notion of it, and this is the whole thing. This is a part of being selfish, is really not caring what's going to happen. And the majority of the time, that takes the form of not caring what happens to the poor, or not caring what happens to the third or developing world. I mean, this can happen to them too, not caring about each other. And it's only a big scandal and a big outrage when they do it to each other.
Right.
There's a whole ton of things that encompass the ideology of selfishness. For example, we always hear about, there's people on welfare that just stay on welfare because they don't want to work. And now there is an element that does do that. But where does that element come from? It comes from a society based on selfishness. If they come through being told their whole lives that it doesn't matter what other people think, just get you for your own, that's one of the manifestations it can take. And particularly if you take someone that clearly doesn't have any opportunity, that is never going to get up there, because based on a system where supposedly everyone can get up there, and that's really not true. So you're going to get that manifestation of selfishness as well. It's just the other side of the selfish coin. It's not just the good side.
Yeah. Well, it's not just the general selfishness of capitalism itself, but I mean this particular capitalist class. I mean, the greed is so damaging, and you have this right-wing myth that they're job creators, and they have their positions through success and so forth, and it's all highly debatable whether they even contribute anything to the economy, because basically they're sucking wealth out of the economy without creating anything new at all. There was a interesting example. You know, some guy has a major lawsuit against Goldman Sachs, again, for who started a software company called Dragon Systems, which is voice recognition software, and they hired Goldman Sachs to be their advisor for mergers and acquisitions business. Goldman Sachs is a name in that. Goldman Sachs also brings new stocks to market through IPOs and so forth. So Goldman Sachs was arranging to merge this company that already traded with Lernout and Houseby, which already had a voice recognition software in the market, supposedly was growing very successfully and so forth. It turns out the accounting in Lernout and Houseby was fraudulent. You know, and apparently Goldman Sachs may have known about it because they were investigating whether to buy a position in the stock on their own, and then they backed off. Well, while they backed off with purchasing stock, they basically recommended the M&A, the merger and acquisition activity proceed forward, which it did, and it was an all-stock deal for the people, the original company, Dragon Systems, that developed this technology. And this company, Dragon Systems, had 400 employees. 400 employees. Okay, so accounting turns out to be fraudulent. This occurs during the time of the internet bursting too. So, I mean, the stock not only fell, but it just goes totally to zero. And the company goes bankrupt. Dragon Systems voice recognition software technology is sold off in a bankruptcy sale to a company called Nuance. And Nuance is brought to market as an IPO by Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs made this huge amount of fees, millions of dollars of fees with this mergers and acquisition activity. It made a huge fee bringing Nuance Systems to market, and the original company got screwed and jobs were lost, and they got nothing for the technology they developed. Matter of fact, they lost their technology. It's now in the hands of somebody else. So it's just basically this capitalist class is a great example of them acting sort of like a parasite, really.
And
just
it follows
the wealth out. And they're supposed to be the innovators, and the actual innovators, the actual job creator in this story, got totally burnt. This was in the New York Times this morning. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's along the same lines of the mentality of the war machine. Give us the money, we smash the country, and then you give us more money to rebuild it.
There's no real reconstruction.
No, not really.
Oh,
This is just the financial aristocracy version of that. This is just the financial sector version of that, essentially. Mm-hmm. Why would you actually create jobs and then go through the whole system there and trying to keep a company afloat? If you just buy one, crash it, build another one, and profit from the whole thing that you engineered.
Exactly. It's a real terrible business, and it's scandal after scandal with this. They're almost like a mafia. You also last week had a multi-million-dollar settlement that was not Bank of America. Bank of America had to pay a fine for the same reason before. Try to remember the name of the bank. Wells Fargo. That's it. Wells Fargo. For discriminatory lending. So black people and Hispanic people were automatically given subprime loans based on the color of their skin and didn't bother with thorough credit checks. And subprime loans, which most went bust on those people. rates were so high.
That one is pretty obvious. Like if they didn't even actually do a background check, then that's pretty bad. I don't even know what honestly the reason for doing that would be. I would have to think that logically speaking, from a rational, economic incentive, you would give it to whoever was capable of making the money back. Well, I mean, there was a whole subprime mortgage thing, but to actually go to the point where not even checking to see if they're really worthwhile of giving a loan to is pretty low. It seems like somebody was really acting out of just pure ignorance.
Yeah. Oh, they were more interested in the package product.
But wasn't that what they did a couple of years ago? I mean, they as far as giving loans to people that couldn't pay them back?
But they did that within a whole mechanism to be able to profit off of that. They put out these loans knowing they couldn't be sold back. And these ones, they're not giving out the loan based on the color of their skin.
Well, they created a great demand for the collateralized debt obligations. And the collateralized debt obligations are a package product. You take the mortgages and you package them together as a bond. So all the mortgages together pay out an interest to the bondholder. That's the CDO. So the incentive to create the CDOs was so great, and they were in cahoots with the rating agencies that gave them like AAA rating, even though none of them merited it. So they were able to incentivize the brokerage forces. Don't worry, just write the loans, and you'll get paid from the fees that we're going to make selling these CDOs when we bundle them up. And then they, as I mentioned earlier, bet against makes bets expecting the CDO to crash in value. So it was an amazing game that was being played in the financial sector. And now the customers of the CDOs, as you said earlier, it was rich people getting hurt. A lot of people would be going to jail. And the biggest customers of these CDO bonds were pension plans of unions and so forth. And you could see where this is headed. Because right now, lately, there's been a lot of screaming. I mentioned before, even Fareed Kavari of CNN wrote an article in Times Magazine about it, saying that there's a big financial crisis, Greek style, going to happen in the United States due to public sector pension funds are just underfunded. The union workers are just hampered and so forth, and we're going to give it in these lavish pensions. Basically, part of their salaries going into the pension fund. But, if the dollar you contributed has become worth 50 cents, the banks that are managing these pension funds are turning around and saying, well, you didn't fund it properly. It's your fault.
There's also the one thing that I think a lot of them are not taking into account is that as workers are leaving the workforce when they reach retirement age, these jobs have been sent overseas. So the pool of money that was being taken in order to fund these things has been drastically cut.
Yeah.
When you have a company like GM with X amount of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers, and then you send a whole ton of their jobs overseas, that younger generation of workers coming in that are putting out union dues and stuff like that to pay for the retirement things aren't there anymore. Well, of course, you're going to have a shortfall of money, and that shortfall of money is a result of jobs being sent overseas. It's underfunded in that it was hard to tell if it was intentionally done that way, but if you don't have it, it's like Social Security. If you have Social Security and then all of a sudden the younger generation coming in doesn't pay into Social Security, you're going to have a funding crisis, and I think that's what's really happened, is that a younger generation of workers don't have these union jobs, or the union jobs have now shrunken down so small that there isn't the pool of wages to draw from to be able to fund it properly because they've been sent overseas. Right.
Well, also that there's, not just less workers, but, especially in the United States, remember we nearly lost we almost lost the entire auto industry. Almost the entire sector went belly up, and we had the great bailout. which, people are patting President Obama on the back for. But he bailed out the elite because it was new workers after the bailout were not being paid $30 an hour anymore, but $15, so half the salary. And so I'm certain a lot less money going into their pension as well. So, that was interesting, by the way, looking at that situation, because you could see, I remember when the CEOs of the auto companies were in front of Congress, and Congress sort of looking down and berating them and so forth, versus the way Congress treats the CEOs of the big banks, which is almost like an absolute reference. So you see this sort of bickering among the elite class too. The elite class of the manufacturing sector doesn't get the respect of the financial elite.
I think it was Michael Moore that put it best when he watched the whole thing. He had said the banks came in, and they came in like friends. They're smoking cigars, shaking each other's hands, having a casual conversation. Yeah, here's the money, no problem. And then you move money around and don't really do anything? Okay, here's everything you want. And then the auto executives come in, and then it's like, oh, who are you? Oh, you make stuff? Oh, to hell with you. Yeah, okay, I guess I can give you something.
Yeah, it was still a bailout of the elite that ran the auto sector, but you can see the way that elite was treated versus the financial elite. It's a night and day difference, and there's always this competition in the elite, especially when it comes to financial matters. Regarding, for example, this whole Ron Paul thing, Austrian economics, and we should be going to the gold standard, and a hatred of the Federal Reserve. I notice that there's a class of the elite that backs this Austrian economics to the hilt, and it's sort of an anger at the financial elite. So you have a set of rich elite that hates the financial elite because they feel they're getting too much of the nanny state and they want their share.
Now, I have noticed that there is a strata within the elite that do tend to put out a lot of the free market libertarian stuff, and to this day, I still thank my stars that this is a movement only in the U.S. and not in Canada or other countries. And I often marvel at that, how it just seems to be the richest, most overprivileged country in the world is whining that they don't have enough. Although that's coming from a particular class of people, not the country in general.
No, it's definitely not the country in general. It's in the hands of a few. The country in general is actually pretty bad. It's getting worse, and there's more people falling into poverty. Several million people that are homeless, and 10 million empty homes that are foreclosed on, and so forth. So it's tragic, actually. So we're sort of heading more and more toward a third world status, but it's the wealthiest country on the earth, and so there's no excuse for everybody at least having a decent lifestyle. In the country you're in, Canada, it's far more egalitarian.
I wouldn't say it's that much more egalitarian. I would say the gap between the rich and the poor is smaller, but
smaller.
It's a smaller gap, but But I think a lot of this
the social safety net that's stronger. So.
Yeah, there's a stronger social safety net. We just recently there was a poll that said 91% of Canadians prefer our healthcare system to a privatized one.
Well, thank heavens.
91% is not a small number. That's fantastic. That's about the last thing I'd ever be willing to give up. In a recession, that's the last thing that should ever go. But unfortunately, that's usually the first thing that does go. But I think that there's definitely the reason why that a lot of this libertarian stuff is coming from some of the greatest of the financial elite, more particularly the Koch brothers, who I'm sure they are going to get a lot more heavily involved in politics than they are now, and their names are going to become more and more common. Honestly, I do believe to a degree it's a ploy. They fund things like the Mises Institute, the Cato Institute,
right.
And a lot of their belief is that corporations aren't real capitalism. But come on, the Koch brothers are multi-billion-dollar corporate owners. Right. That would seem like a massive contradiction on their part. because I really believe what their real purpose is to try to make it look like there's a demand from the people to deregulate. I think that's really what it's about. And then once they have that illusion that people want everything deregulated, Washington's going to go ahead and do it. I mean, I'm not saying that the Koch brothers are actually genuinely funding a movement to destroy themselves. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, they are.
They're going to make it look like there's supposed to be deregulation, and then Washington will carry through on that, and they're pretty much going to hand over the country even more to the elite. And there is a contradiction between the financial and the industrial elite, like the Koch brothers and Goldman Sachs.
The Koch brothers is in a part of the industrial elite that's much more powerful than, say, manufacturing. I mean, the Koch brothers is the largest privately owned oil and gas company in the country, and oil and gas is, extremely powerful. I mean, that's one of the reasons why this country has, well over a third to possibly even half the citizens of this country question man-made global warming as a concept. It's because of tens of millions of dollars spent on propaganda by people like the Koch, as well as other industries, ExxonMobil and so forth, donating to conservative think tanks like the Heartland Institute that focus on that area. And when you look at our behavior in terms of wars and so forth, they tend to be oil and gas related too. So it's a very powerful sector. So there's a good reason why the Koch brothers are very powerful. The Koch brothers in particular, though, tend to be ideological nuts, and that's why they stick out and are mentioned frequently in the liberal press, because they seem to go above and beyond stuff that has to do with their own industry. Like in certain communities, apparently, the Koch brothers got involved with the local politics and blew money on elections for the board of directors for local schools to do things like bring back segregation between black and white people. It's very weird. I mean, they're nutcase right-wing ideologues, and they have a lot of money, and so they're trying to bring their vision to life. So that's what makes them more dangerous than, say, the average CEO that's focused solely on whatever he can lobby for to increase his bottom line profit.
I'd like to tell people to give us a call at 760-539-3207, and one of the topics that we haven't touched on yet tonight is far left view differing from the mainstream.
Okay, well, I was trying to sort of break into that by discussing something specific, but well, Jason, how do you think the far left view varies from the mainstream?
Well,
I mean, we're further left than MSNBC.
Talk about what you've been talking about. Now, how is the mainstream covering that, and how is the far left covering it? Is there a difference?
Well, a lot of it has to do with perspective. There's two key elements: objective truth and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You can outright lie, like Fox News.
We've seen that,
right.
yeah.
Fox
Okay.
News, yeah.
And we have our own version of Fox News here, but fortunately they're going bankrupt.
And, what are they called?
Bravo.
Sun News Network.
Okay.
They recently, in the last quarter, had to take a $3 million cash infusion from their parent company, Quebecor Media Incorporated, to maintain operations. They're really trying hard to break in as the Fox News of Canada, but the public's just not watching. That's just not going to work here. The ultra far right view just doesn't work here. People don't want it. But you can outright lie, and you can also, as a matter of perspective. I mean, obviously, if you took any rich person, if you decrease the wealth of the rich, they're going to say it's horrible and you're killing the economy. Whether or not it kills the economy is a completely different objective situation. For example, the wealthy have taken a massive hit in Venezuela, but the poverty rate's been cut in half. the extreme poverty rate's been cut a great deal, and their economy is growing a great deal right now.
Right.
Objectively, less people are in poverty. However, the view of the media, from the rich is that it's terrible, and it's a horrible dictatorship, and they're stealing from them.
Yeah.
It's a matter of perspective. For example, one of the books that was written to slander Mao was written by Young Chang, and I believe his parents were wealthy landlords.
Right.
And they lost their privilege of that position and everything that they were doing to the working class. So from his perspective, his family's perspective, that was a terrible, horrible, evil thing. It does, people, even left media isn't even really very good at this.
Right.
It's like they will not criticize the profit motive. Like even even more independent leftist media like the Young Turks will go, oh, it's the banks, they're greedy, they're taking too much, and then Cenk Uygur will turn around in like the next sentence and then say, would I love to be rich? Hell yeah, I'd love to be rich.
Yeah.
And we'll never question the source of that greed.
Yeah. I mean, they blame it on crony capitalism. They don't look at the system overall. They say it's a couple bad apples, you know.
Yeah, it's unchristian capitalism. It's crony capitalism. No, that is capitalism. Like, this is what it does. Just because you don't like it, that doesn't mean it's like some kind of aberrant behavior. It's not a couple of bad apples. This is what it does. This is what it's always going to do.
Right. I would say with the stories with the financial sector is, I mean, when it's portrayed as crony capitalism, but for the most part, actually, the media has been trying to avoid it altogether. Media Matters published an article looking at the LIBOR scandal, and they looked at the total time spent talking about it in the prime time, evening news, combining MSNBC, NBC, CNN, ABC, CBS. Looked at all those networks together, and total 12 minutes of time spent on the story. 12 minutes. That's a big story in England, and it's on continuously. Here, 12 minutes.
Over
so it was pretty much,
How many days?
That's over the entire week. So, I mean, over the weekend, actually different, because you have on MSNBC you have Chris Hayes, who's much more progressive than usual. Actually, started a morning show on weekends called Up with Chris Hayes, and he spent, I think, 14, 15 minutes on the topic in his one show, which is remarkable when you consider what everybody else did, which was just mention it for a minute and a half.
I've got to catch up, because I know nothing, because I just got back in and I was totally away from computers. And
from the real world.
Actually, I was in the real world. This is the other world.
Yeah, actually, well, the rest of reality is probably more real than this.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't expect to see Chris Hayes around much longer, because I think recently he's challenged just a little bit too much, and that they're probably going to consider getting rid of him soon. Particularly his whole thing, should we be celebrating the troops as heroes no matter what? I mean, that's almost an unthinkable thing to do in itself. Yeah. And the media itself has its own interests when it comes to things like this. They'll report on them because they themselves need to, because other wealthy industrial capitalists do want to know when these scams are coming. So they can try to avoid them themselves. And the media itself wants to have a particular reputation for, we will get to the bottom of things, we do hard news, and people will watch them because of that. But they also have a vested interest in keeping the system going the way it is. They only want to report about it up until the point that it helps their reputation. But if it starts to be, poisonous to the actual system to say too much, then they'll cut back. So you see a bit of a contradiction there. They need to do it in order to maintain their own reputation, thus maintaining their own profits, but they can't do it too much, or they'll be threatening their own profits by threatening the system.
Right.
So they're walking a fine line.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I found to be so much, just so true when I started studying Marxism. Every system is a system of contradiction, and that's a prime example of it.
Balance. Yeah.
Yeah, so so many contradictions in capitalism. That's why Karl Marx predicted it would destroy itself. That competition would squeeze worker wages and destroy all small businesses and just leave large monopolies and cause liquidity crisis, and all of which we're seeing now. Most of it was prevented, though, from Marx's vision of capitalism collapsing was in many ways prevented by Marx's own prediction that it would collapse because of his literature and the Communist Manifesto and so forth, that it did inspire worker revolts and played a role in leading to the existence of labor unions and so forth that pushed back against private power. And also that's what slowed down the collapse of capitalism.
And the world also didn't polarize exactly the way that he had predicted it would. For example, the gap between the rich and the poor, leveled out, and it became smaller. But the gap between the rich countries and the poor countries grew tremendously.
Right.
He hadn't predicted that, but that is what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't really consider the life cycle of countries themselves, early stage civilizations versus ours.
Again, that's the best prediction somebody can make for 150 years in the future.
His work is very remarkable, really. And he's certainly done better than anything that neoliberals threw together, which is very damaging economics.
How did you get interested in this? You said when you were studying Marx's writings. What happened? Did anything happen, or you were just reading and you said, hey, this makes sense? What?
Actually, it's actually kind of a funny story. I had left high school in the year 2000, and now this was only 6 years after NAFTA had gone through. So this is about the time when the real impact of jobs having been sent to other countries, or particularly Mexico, had just started being felt. And I had been very right-wing all through high school. This is the best country in the world, and everybody thinks they're the best country in the world. And there's unlimited opportunity, and if you don't get anything, then it's because your own fault. And then I walked out into the working world and was like, oh, it's kind of not like that in real life.
Yeah.
In real life, it's like it's grinding. Even now,
right.
I'm only 30 years old, and my right ankle's almost completely shot. I've got tendonitis in both my elbows. I've just completely wrecked my body from doing labor, and I haven't even really been doing it that long, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And when I actually got the tendonitis, I went to the doctor. I said, okay, here's a note, no heavy lifting for, until the pain goes away. So I come back, and I give the note to my employer. Technically, it was through a temp agency, so I didn't give it to the temp agency. I gave it to the place I worked for. And he turned around and looked at me and said, well, if you can't do the job we need you for, then I guess we don't need you anymore.
Right.
Oh, dear.
Right.
And that was a huge, huge smack in the face for reality. And I noticed, of course, a huge disconnect between what it was that I had grown to believe and the way things actually were. And then I started looking around, and then I had come across this thing on the internet explaining what the Communist Manifesto said, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. All of history has been a history of class struggle.
Yeah.
Says, okay, that actually starts to make sense, and then more of it started to make sense, and I started going deeper and deeper into it, and then I got to where I am now.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I had wondered before and hadn't asked you. Yeah. But I could see that would just sort of shake up your faith in the institution as you thought it would be. So, okay. Well, good. I'm glad that I'm not glad that happened to you. But I'm
sorry to hear that too.
And event that
it had to happen.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's just like nobody really likes going to have surgery, but the surgery has to happen.
Exactly. And sometimes we have to perform that surgery ourselves as far as getting rid of toxic people and toxic ideas in our life.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the media in society is set up to pretty much numb people out, and especially the notion of class struggle is sort of whitewashed. And if it's brought up politically, it's what's that?
They don't talk about it, do they?
No, not really.
Have it, so.
I mean, actually, the left almost never talked about it. Occasionally, a rich person would talk about it, but in a joking manner. And the right would talk about it more often than not, usually to accuse some liberal policy of being class warfare, such as a tax increase on wealthy to pay for something. That's actually very old, and we hear that even more now than ever. And that's the one positive thing about Occupy is when that occurred was it brought to the forefront the notion of class struggle to a portion of society, but that's also a reason why it was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
You had the elite use the police forces to pretty much destroy the encampments.
We do have Gonzala here who has a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
for
get
Jason.
here. Okay, there you are, Gonzala, 301. You're on the air now.
Hello, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I happened to see that there was going to be a show, so I thought I might as well call in. This is a question regarding, if you don't mind, I would like to ask Jason. Is he in there?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, I don't know if you've seen it, but a while ago he made a video regarding the whole business of his job and his transition from a right-wing person to a communist. But I was wondering, Jason, I rarely ever see on YouTube people with that tone of telling people to, wake up. That tone of you had enough of people talking to you that way. What really triggered you? Was there a particular event, a particular discussion with somebody that triggered that response?
From going from right wing to being left wing?
Yeah, you had a video called A Moment of Honesty, and that's the one I was referring to.
Yeah, that was a video going back a while ago. It's just actually I'm having a hard time remembering what that video even was.
Well, it was like, you don't know what the real world is. That line stuck with me, so maybe that was...
Oh, yeah. Now I remember. It was the I think you want to say a culture shock or a reality shock that when I left high school and I walked out into the real world and realized it was nothing like I was told it was going to be. It just wasn't like that at all. In some cases, it is kind of my own fault, because we all heard in high school, going to work is harder than going to school, and I didn't believe it, and I thought, well, you go to work, you're getting paid, and that's better than school, and then you walk out there and 6-7 hours in class is a hell of a lot different than 8 hours or 9 hours of manual labor. And it was just a huge shock. You get out there and you actually go to work and nobody gives a damn about you. Like I said, that guy was going to throw me out the door for having tendinitis for making him money. I mean, I was lifting 60-pound blocks of frozen beef.
He didn't care. You were a temp worker, and it's like you meant nothing to him.
And that was the ridiculousness of the entire situation. Everybody was through a temp agency. There were people there who were there for 10 years that were through a temp agency.
Well, a lot of companies, it's cheaper for some companies to hire and just maintain it that way than to hire.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about benefits and so forth.
Exactly.
I mean, why do you think other people don't make this? Because a lot of other people do go through the suffering that you've gone through, but they don't come to the realization. Why do you think that majority don't?
I think the real reason that happens is, for some, it may be a difficulty identifying the source. Like there are, you can go work at good places, or you could go work at bad places. Like if you get a better education, you can go to a better place, get more money, and therefore, theoretically, the whole system isn't like that.
Yeah, well, don't count on that.
The people on the bottom want to stay there, and they want to live like that because they don't want to learn or do anything else like that. I mean, I know that's not true.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to live that way. They do it out of economic necessity. It's just not realistic that everybody can just quit their job and then go to school, and then it's insane. Labor jobs massively outnumber the jobs that are better paying, stuff like that, and someone still has to do them.
Right.
The system couldn't even function itself. It's just the whole illusion of what capitalism is supposed to be got shattered in a couple of years after working and just realizing that's just not true. And some people, they may choose just not to believe it. Okay, well, if I just get a job somewhere else, it'll be better. It's just this place.
Yeah, because then they think that, well, that was sort of my fault because I went to the wrong place. I mean, they've been conditioned to think that they're doing
their own fault.
Wrong.
Yeah, I think the majority of people are conditioned by the media and so forth, and by education, to take the blame on themselves. It's my fault. There must be something wrong with me.
Right. If something's not working right, it's always me. It's got to be something I'm doing.
There's nothing you can do about it within the context of the system.
Well, that's
you could do all kinds of things, but you'd be going outside of the rules of the system in order to do it.
Right.
And so we do have another comment or question here from 229. Hello, Dina.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, we're great. What would you like to ask Jason?
I would just like to ask Jason, first of all, I'd like to make a comment that I have watched some of the videos, and I appreciated them very much, being a socialist myself.
Yay!
And I would like to just ask the question. Okay, we had, like, the Bolshevik Revolution. We had the rise of the National Socialist Party in Europe. We had dictators like Pol Pot. At what point should citizens become aware that someone in their own faction is going to seize control? Because it's in human nature, most humans at least, to want to have more things, to want something shinier than the next. And if everyone works really, really hard to eradicate an oppressive capitalistic system, at what point, what should we watch for? What should the catalyst be that we know that there is a wolf in the flock? That's my only question. I'll hang up and listen to the answer. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, my dear.
Well, actually, this was normally the most base answer would be just watch for anybody who's kind of seeking their own glory, but sometimes that's not always readily apparent. Mao put forward a work on how to recognize a revisionist line, meaning something that was intending to return to the old exploitive society. Now, look at what the policy will do. Will it unite people or will it divide people? And if you can analyze that enough, you can begin to see what it is that what it's really intended to do. And from there, you can make, you can come to the decision whether you think it's reactionary or not. I mean, Hitler's Germany, that one would have been really, really obvious right out from the top. Did it unite everybody? No, the Jews got pushed out pretty damn fast.
Well, that was in there with the start.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that while objectively Hitler was very successful at what he did, what he set out to do, he brought inflation under control, he brought the country out of poverty, he basically turned it into a world superpower. Those are objective facts. I hate his guts, I hate white supremacy with a passion, but those are objective facts that you can't deny. It's the means by which it was done and the consequences of having actually gotten there. That's what's up for question. But you could see how the society was deliberately intended to turn certain people against each other. It divided people, not united people. And obviously the people that benefited from that deliberate creation of a divide were the ones that supported it. And he was, in a sense, obviously Hitler was not being altruistic. He was using people's greed and selfishness. Hey, you're better than everybody else. I mean, this can go into American exceptionalism, the British Empire. This goes into just everything. So really, it was the same thing that was already being done. But to answer her question, when you look at whether something divides people or unites people, then that's a very good indication of what it might be. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it would be a very large clue.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Good question, good answer. So who?
Well, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Brian.
No, lost my train of thought.
I was going to ask, Jason, what kind of, besides the one that you put out that everybody likes on YouTube, what would you suggest? Is there some type of left mainstream that you really could suggest to people?
I don't think it's as simple as just not being mainstream. You could, for the most part, take any libertarian and say that they're not the mainstream.
Oh, okay.
Technically, they're not.
Not libertarian. We're wanting somebody who's ready to do more than reform.
Libertarians definitely have a bigger budget. It's because they tend to be sometimes corporate sources of funding and so forth. I notice. I think earlier we were talking a little bit during the day about Lee Doran, who has a YouTube channel, How the World Works or something.
Oh, boy.
It's very right-wing, and the guy works for the Cato Institute, though it's not brought
the
up.
The Competitive Enterprise Institute.
Competitive Enterprise.
So where do we go?
So you watch it, and the production values of his thing are all very nice and high. It's not amateurishly done. I think there's a lot of figures arising on the far left that are gaining a stronger and stronger voice. None of them are going to be the mainstream, but I think that we can try to at least grow like the labor press did back in say the early 1920s, 1930s. The alternative media was the labor press, which was very anti-capitalist, very amateurish, and published and was pretty much given away for free.
It's hard to compete with the massive, huge monopolies that exist now.
Oh,
in the 20s was pretty easy. I mean,
you can't.
Television was almost non-existent at the time. Almost nobody had a television, so you were dependent on print, and print is a very simple medium, and it can be a very cost-effective medium as well.
Yes.
But now in a digital, it's kind of like there's a good side and a bad side. In the digital age, it becomes much more expensive because television monopolizes the majority of what we see. And it's extremely expensive to be able to run that, and you need very powerful backers in order to fund that. However, because it is the digital age and anybody can just throw up a blog, it also becomes much simpler to do as well. The problem is there's such a large sea of voices. It can be hard to actually find the one that you really connect with.
Right. Well, I think the one thing we can hope for is a rising distrust of the mainstream media. And we're seeing some signs of that. I mean, the ratings of CNN, for example, collapsed 50%. Some of it's because they're trying to compete with Fox. They're moving a bit more of a right-wing direction. But I think people overall are just getting fed up with some of the information. They feel lied to, that they're not getting all the information on what's going on. I mean, rather than focus on the real stories, like the Liber scandal, just a few minutes here and there, but you'll have plenty of time being spent on, say, a horrible case involving pedophilia or something.
I think RT's the Alana show actually really does put it best when she said there are real stories out there and the mainstream media is not covering it, but people know that they're going on, so they go to the internet and they start seeing that. I think that's really what's going on, is that people know that there's things going on that we're not being told about or that are being left out of the media. So, that's one of the things that she does, is turn around and cover those things. And I think that's why a lot of people are leaving the mainstream media.
I agree.
RT is one of the places you would go then, right, Jason?
I do.
You do?
I do go to RT a lot.
I'm very curious where you go.
I do go to RT a lot, but you can't rely on them for everything. Every media, even if it is RT, has their own agenda. I mean, the channel...
Right.
It is...
Look around, yeah.
Yeah, RT is pro-Putin because it is the state media channel.
Never criticizes Russian
really
politics.
You can't rely on them to really criticize the Russian government. However, you can rely on them to criticize the U.S. government. You can rely on them to criticize the British government.
Right.
So in that aspect, they are, relatively true. It's they don't criticize everyone. It's like, obviously you watch the U.S. media, it doesn't really criticize the U.S., but they're very good at criticizing other countries. So it's a matter of knowing which one to go to for what issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm a little bit disappointed. Go ahead.
Well, my question remains, I'm very curious as to where Jason goes, because I know we go to several different places, and I'm just curious. He makes videos, and I am curious where he goes.
I'm disappointed with, say, some of the business reporting done on RT America, Capital Account and Max Kaiser. I mean, they're enjoyable to watch, but they tend to put very right-wing Austrian economist types on their shows. Nothing on the left. It's usually you have someone that's criticizing how the American currency should be backed on gold or something. It's just, so that's rather bizarre. They're almost trying to avoid it. And the channel did disparage the Communist Party a few times too. The Communist Party of Russia, that is.
That's their job.
So you could see that direction. But overall, I agree. It has some exceptional coverage and critique of this country, and definitely points out the issues with the elites here.
So where else, Jason, besides RT?
Actually, I have a steady stream of news organizations that I check every day. I have about 31 different sources, and then anything anybody sends me.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
For example, Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is pretty good. Although they've really gotten really weird in the last year. It's like they've really started to pick up a bias.
Yeah, well, it's again, you have to look at who owns it and why. And I've always had trouble pronouncing the country. Was it Qatar?
Yeah.
How you pronounce it? Qatar.
Yeah.
Qatar had financial interests in NATO invading Libya, so its coverage of Libya was very pro-NATO. I've noticed that, and that hurt actually a lot of credibility. I have a number of left viewers. Remember Tariq Ali being very critical of it. So, that'll happen here and there.
Right, you do have to, be aware
of where
they're coming from and their bias.
When it's covering, for example, what's happening to the Palestinians, its coverage is second to none, really. So it does a good job, because Western media pretty much completely ignores that situation there.
Yeah. Actually, Al Jazeera was the main source I was watching during the Arab Spring in Egypt.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, it was
right, and they got cut off a
coverage.
couple times. Yeah.
You can rely on certain media outlets to
Cover
report certain
areas
things
or certain topics. Yeah.
Like you can expect RT, in terms of international politics, will not toe a U.S. imperialist line. They won't do it.
No,
but they'll toe their own imperialist line.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They will do that.
Yeah.
But you can only rely on them to do certain things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, their financial coverage is very right-wing, because I believe that RT America is trying to reach out to a much wider audience.
Yeah.
And trying to get some of the niche viewers that are disenfranchised by the mainstream media, and that's actually a very smart business model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's to grab up the people that aren't watching the other networks because they're disenfranchised by it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. You know, press TV is sort of gaining some type of interest among the left, I noticed too. Caught some interesting interviews with, for example, former Congressman Cynthia McKinnon, who later on was trying to be a Green candidate for president several years ago. And she was basically talking about how AIPAC just, this sort of sneaks into your campaign offering services and offering to help raise money for you, and then they sort of trap the politician. Well, if you want more, you have to sort of, agree with our needs.
And I've just made you an offer you can't refuse.
Refuse, yeah. Yeah. So she gave a really interesting, detailed talk about how powerful AIPAC is on our Congress on Press TV. So it's Iran's TV network.
Right.
Obviously, they have set goals and a set agenda too. But
the main agenda now is not getting killed.
Yeah, that's a good goal.
Yeah, I think the Press TV office in England was forced to shut down, actually.
Yep,
So,
they blocked Press TV in the UK, and that's how you know the British government is being altruistic.
Yeah.
You know the guy we're trying to go to war against? Let's not listen to him.
Right.
Yeah. And I gather China is planning to develop a similar type of RTV on its own, but I haven't seen anything rolled out yet.
I would be very, very interested to see how that works.
Yeah, so would I. So would I. Yeah. Very.
I know one person I do know online actually has CCTV on his cable. I think he has satellite TV, and he actually does get CCTV in English.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Does he like it? Does he think it's pretty good, or?
Yeah, he does. He likes it.
Okay.
Again, because it doesn't toe a U.S. imperialist line. It toes a Chinese imperialist line, absolutely.
Right.
It's much more critical of the system that he's in.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that being the irony, you have to go out of your system in order to get the real criticism of it, rather than that should be coming from the inside kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And they have Democracy Now!
Amy
Goodman. And that's independent. That's not funded by any type of advertising or anything like that. So her perspective is very good, and her stories are very good.
Yeah, her stories are pretty good. She just did the one thing that I thought was really, really questionable.
Yeah, she's done a few things, and gotten heavy criticism for it. Go ahead.
She was sharing the Amnesty International thing on. I think it was on Libya, and she was on stage and sharing the stage with a guy. I'm going to look like an idiot because I can't remember anybody's name. I had a video on it somewhere. She was sharing the stage with a guy who was paid by the U.S. to carry out death squad type actions inside Libya. And I wonder if she really knew who she was on stage with. And Amnesty International their whole stuff on Libya was absolutely horrendous. They were a wholly owned subsidiary of the U.S. government at that point,
Oh.
Are you sure you're thinking of Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch? Human Rights Watch got a lot of heavy criticism for that, I think. And it was Human Rights Watch. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it was definitely Amnesty International. Human Rights Watch, I've heard that stuff too. But no, Amnesty International, if you actually really look at what they're saying, when they criticize something like the U.S. or the U.K. or whatever, small reforms, but when you look at other countries, they say there has to be a regime change. And during the whole invasion of Libya, they completely ignored all the bombings that were killing tens of thousands of civilians.
Right.
It just completely blanked it out.
Yeah. I mean, it seems that these Human Rights Watch organizations do an excellent job watching the human rights abuses, but it seems that at times they deliberately let themselves be used for humanitarian intervention, and perhaps that because they depend on donations, that could be the source of the money influencing that. I wondered, but definitely, they've been accused of that regarding Syria too.
One of the worst examples I've ever seen of that was they had put out their report of what the healthcare was like in North Korea, and had lambasted it was horrible, it was evil, it was all this other stuff. And then the World Health Organization came out with a counter report and outright called them liars.
Really?
And they gave statistic proof showing that they were lying. I made a video on that almost a year ago on a list I called Defend DPRK Week, where the World Health Organization came out and exposed them and said, well, here's the people you asked, and these people haven't lived in the country in 10 years. You say, such and such program doesn't exist, yet we were there 4 months ago carrying out that program. Here's how much money we gave them. Here's the name of the doctors who went and carried out that program, and they just completely eviscerated the Amnesty International report.
Yeah, it's a shame, because you know that Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, some of the work they do is quite good, but it looks like in some of their other work they let themselves get co-opted for a specific purpose. And
in fact, I think they're very much just like media in general. Every newspaper has some guy that they know will get to the bottom of the truth of anything that you put him on, and usually they hold that guy back and put him on less important stuff. But when they really want something done, they transfer him over, and that to do that and do his job really, really well, and that gives them the journalistic, the appearance of journalistic integrity. Not that guy, but the paper itself, and then they pull him back and go back to doing whatever it is they want. It's very selective in terms of their own appearance and what the function it is that they're supposed to carry out. Again, another contradiction. You have to look good in order for people to trust you, but your job is to deceive them.
Yeah. Well, in the case of the news media, the mainstream media of America, it's to keep the discussion in a very narrow political spectrum, but have a very active debate within that spectrum. So it looks like people are intensely discussing the subject, and people are happy and complacent and don't think of what's anything outside of that spectrum. So regarding Iran, the debate is whether Iran has weapons or not, and obviously if it does, it should be bombed, is apparently the conclusion. And there's no real discussion on, perhaps Iran has every right to have a nuclear bomb, because after all, they just want deterrence to protect themselves. We kind of gave that signal, if you're weak and you can't protect yourselves, we'll go in and destroy you, as we did with Iraq. And that's not even discussed, right?
And that's one of the things that's not being discussed, is the fact that nothing says that they actually have any weapons-grade uranium. International Atomic Energy keeps coming back saying there's nothing there. Even the CIA keep coming back with reports saying there's nothing there. There's no nuclear weapons program, and it's just weapons of mass destruction all over again. All the people that are going to investigate keep coming back with nothing. But the politicians keep saying, we know they're building nuclear weapons. Well, you literally don't know that, but people keep buying it. In fact, they're starting to do that to Syria now. The Wall Street Journal, a couple of days ago, put out a claim by an unknown U.S. official And that's all they have is the statement of an unknown U.S. official that says Syria is getting ready to carry out ethnic cleansing.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
And I think the fact that it hasn't really been picked up and taken that seriously is a testament to just how believable it really is. The claim by an unnamed U.S. official was that chemical weapons in Syria are being taken out of their storage sheds and are being moved. Now, Syria does have chemical weapons. That's true, because they never signed the Chemical Warfare Convention, whatever, and that they're moving them and for the purpose of carrying out an ethnic cleansing. Although of all the ethnic groups that are there, they don't say which ones are being targeted. And then they also give out multiple reasons. They're moving them as like a threat to the public, or they're moving it because they think the rebels are getting too close to the weapons themselves, and if they get a hold of it, that would be a really bad thing. But again, it was done without any evidence. I mean, we didn't even get these vague satellite photos this time, the same way we did with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And I think the fact that the media is really not picking up on it is a testament to how unbelievable it actually really is. I mean, the Syrian government would have to be nothing. Yeah, the Syrian government would have to be nothing short of complete and utter incompetent idiots if they were to carry out an ethnic cleansing right now. I mean, even if they wanted to do something like that.
I mean, the best thing that could happen with Syria would be for everybody to just stop selling people weapons, and that would end it. So, I mean, you have Russia selling weapons to the Syrian government, and we're sort of sneakily, through the Saudis, getting weapons in the hands of the rebels, and the weapons flow just keeps on going. And so the massacres on both sides keep on going. If people would put their foot down and just stop it with the weapons, that would be it.
Even historically neutral countries are getting involved. It's Swiss hand grenades are ending up in the hands of rebels.
No, jeez. And both sides are not all that great. Because it's a mess. I guess. Well, Assad's no great character. I mean, his father was president forever, so basically dictator, family-run business.
It may not be great, but it is his country, and we need to get the hell out of it.
I agree, but he's extremely oppressive. I mean, it was actually even before the Arab Spring started there was a small communist party that was building up there, and he had it destroyed.
He has a lot of people who actually like him.
25% of the population likes him, which is a sizable portion. 25%.
More than we've got here.
Yeah. So 25% of the population likes him. He's very oppressive to the Sunni population. That's the majority of the Sunnis. And the Sunnis are rebelling. But the problem with the Sunni rebels is that they're sectarian, or they're behaving sectarian. It's not a people's uprising. And the Sunnis are taking advantage of the situation to not only attack the Shia government, but also the Christians and everybody else. It's a mess. It's a horrible mess.
The thing is, they need to settle it themselves, and they would if we would keep out of it. And
no, it's not just us.
The rebels.
Not just
us.
us.
No, but we're
Russia's a terrible player in it too. Yeah, you have a few rich oligarchs in Russia, fewer in Russia than here, obviously, and a couple of them make boatloads of money selling weapons. And
well,
so,
these people, it has nothing to do with the country they're from, because they're so far above that they have no allegiance to a country. They have allegiance to money and power.
Yeah.
So they'll work with others of the same ilk.
I mean, if America and Russia agreed to stop selling weapons, that would be the end of it. But I mean, Kofi Annan went in there to attempt to negotiate peace, and it was like it was pretty much an impossible task for Kofi Annan from the start. So it's a horrible situation. They're almost goading it to turn into civil. I mean, the American Red Cross already describes it as a civil war. It's a mess. What were you about to say, Jason?
Let's say, if it were a legitimate uprising, then I might be inclined to support it. But since I know it's coming from foreign powers who are seeking their own interest, that completely changes the situation. Then objectively, it's not a legitimate uprising of people against the government.
No.
I think it's a combination of both.
Friends all the time.
Well, I mean, I know other people too. I think it's a combination of both. I think that some legitimate, but for the most part, the people that were some of the original protesters are probably already dead, and there are people that want to see it knocked down because they're allied to Iran. So. And Syria is also sympathetic to the Palestinians and so forth. So there are plenty
also
of
one of the
reasons
few places left that doesn't have a U.S. base in them.
Yeah. That's also very true.
I have a question for you off this topic, Jason. Do you think in the next few months we're going to see some type of a false flag like before the U.S. election?
In Syria or in the U.S.?
No, nothing to do with Syria. In the U.S., I've heard people think that something may happen at the Olympics, but I'm thinking more of the U.S.
Yeah, there's always people who think that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've said that at every single Olympics that something's going to happen, or right before an election something's going to happen. It's really a toss-up because I think genuinely Barack Obama and Mitt Romney are pretty close.
Yeah.
And a false flag attack, it could tip it either way. Like, you never know. I think when it's that close, it's really questionable. But I think in this situation, I mean, there's always a possibility it could happen, but I don't think it'll happen in this one. Something could happen in the Olympics. I mean, there's always something that could happen, but
that was one bit of
controversy.
That was one bit of controversy last week regarding the Mitt Romney said very little on foreign policy himself, and when he does, it's from the pack of people he surrounds himself with, and it's basically all the neoconservatives that worked for George W. Bush are around him. Matter of fact, Dick Cheney held a fundraiser for Mitt Romney last week, former vice president, and there was a complete news blackout on that fundraiser, unlike the one in the Hamptons the week prior. But anyway, regarding foreign policy, Mitt Romney, I guess, criticized Obama on being too soft on Venezuela, as he warned that Venezuela is a threat to the United States. And Obama...
That doesn't exist.
No, it's a joke. And Obama, made a statement that Venezuela is not a threat to us. That's absurd. And apparently, Hugo Chavez himself got into it and said, overall, America's imperialist capitalist nation, but I think Obama's a good guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that
was funny.
By him.
What's that?
I think that was a political move by him.
Yeah.
I would say so, but it's still
I thought so too. That was funny.
They're always trying to walk the balance between hating the American government and not hating the American people.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
I agree.
They don't hate the people. They realize that we are trapped by our own.
Well, there's a heating assistance program for the poor in the United States that Hugo Chavez contributes money to. So
it's also it's a unique perspective that I have over my own audience, is that I'm not an American, that I am looking at all this from the outside, and I can tell you, as someone who's not on the inside, who's not in America, it's really hard to believe people sometimes when you see so much overwhelming stuff coming out that at times it seems as though a progressive voice is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
And, enough happens and there's enough resentment that builds that, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, on that note, you've quite a few of your last few videos have been commentaries on America. Your most recent about the huge food insecurity in this country. Perhaps you want to talk a little bit about that. I thought that was an exceptional video.
Yeah, it's going back to what I said before about Marx always saying that it's a system of contradiction, and how a country with the greatest access to resources in the entire world, it's particularly in terms of food, is having a lack of access to proper food, and that is all bound up with the profit motive itself. The cheapest food is the one the low-income people are going to have to buy. They just have to. And the way it's produced, cheaply as possible, is what makes it unhealthy. And that's the bottom line on that.
Yeah. Like, as you mentioned, using the high fructose corn syrup and so forth, and so the poorer populations are getting the worst food, and hence the high incidence of obesity. So it's almost contradictory. But it's...
I mean, I've been to the U.S. a few times, and I've seen a U.S. grocery store, and there's a stark difference between your grocery stores and our grocery stores. I remarked one time, the person I was with says, "Where's the food section?" It's like you go in and almost the whole place is nothing but freezers.
And then packaged goods, which
like pre-processed,
for us.
frozen and stuff like that. And there's just a huge difference. Somebody once told me the best way to go grocery shopping is to only shop against the outside walls of the store.
You
That way you're sticking to, you'd always notice the breads, the fresh meats, and the eggs and the dairy are all along the walls that are connected to the outside of the building, and it's the stuff in the middle that's less healthy.
It's all the canned goods.
Usually.
Right, but, the meat isn't healthy for several reasons, but one is what they shoot into them. So the
that's a whole...
The dairy and all, that's a whole other thing,
but a white chicken breast is still better than a bag of frozen chicken nuggets any day.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
I don't know, I haven't had chicken for almost 30 years, so, maybe not that long. But
Ruth-Ann's a vegetarian. I'm not bold enough to take that.
No, I'm a vegan.
Yet.
Brian has meals without meat, though. He can do that.
Not lately.
I was thinking along the lines of one day maybe becoming vegetarian, because just for the fact that if a land that's used to graze cattle was used to grow a crop instead, it would feed 10 times as many people.
Here right now is somewhere between 16 and 17 people can live on the acreage that it takes to bring one cow to market. So that's quite impressive. So for a world, and I mean the water that's used and the forests that are cut down, just environmentally it makes a lot of sense. If you care about the planet, you'll think about it.
It's just a more efficient use of resources. It's a tremendously more efficient use.
Sure. Yeah.
And that brings up another newsworthy topic, actually. So I was reading a story today about cattle farmers in the south of areas of Texas and so forth, really having major problems money-wise because they can't feed their cattle, and so they're trying to have fire sales on their cattle, and demand for that is very low. We've had such extreme changes in the weather due to climate change, even though the mainstream media won't connect the two.
It doesn't exist.
That it's caused droughts and wildfires and so forth, and major agricultural producing states. And those states are seeing the corn crops as literally destroyed. I think 5 states are actually in a state of emergency now over the destruction of the corn crop. And those states also produce soybean. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's almost funny. I can see the image in my head of a Texas beef farmer standing there next to his cows, not having enough to eat, and then saying Barack Obama is an evil Muslim that's trying to convince us that global warming is real because he's evil, and it's like you're standing right next to what's doing that to your damn produce. Like, come on, global warming isn't real. You're sitting right there, and it's literally killing
very
your
real.
business.
It's really this is
beautiful corn today. Because I was at a festival in Ohio, and coming back to Indiana and Illinois, we actually still have some gorgeous corn and soybeans. I mean, granted, they're GMOs, but I mean, that has not hit the area that I drove through. So, I mean, there's still some places where it's looking good.
And even here where I live, I live in the wine country of Ontario, and it's having an effect on that as well. One of the effects is that our winters have been getting more mild and shorter, and that's been pretty harmful to the ice wine industry. Very good.
I've read about that. Well, not in Ontario, but Australia and New Zealand. The wine, the flavor is different. Not worse, just different. It's not what people expected. But we've got like 2 minutes, guys. So you want to final words of wisdom?
Well, it goes by so fast with Jason. You have to come back again. Please, do you have any final thoughts, Jason? Yeah, it's just always a pleasure. But,
I guess all I can really say is question everything you hear.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to bring up one quick thing. That was interesting a week ago. Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, he actually came out and admitted climate change is a problem. It is man-made, and it's caused by its product. But don't worry, man can adapt. It's just a minor engineering problem.
Right.
Okay, well, it was good he admitted it, but then the fact that don't worry because we'll still take care of it, that's the scary part.
Sounds like he's already got his ark built.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has his escape plan.
That's it. Jason, we really appreciate having you here, and we would love for you to come back.
Yeah, no problem. Just shoot me a message on Facebook.
Okay, and sorry, so that.
No, I'm not able to use Facebook for several days.
For 3 days, so.
3 days.
God, Brian, I don't know you.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't promote the next show.
Well, you got reported. I got reported, but they didn't throw me off. But of course, they don't tell you who reports you either. So, whatever.
Oh, one thing to keep in mind with Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg, his grandfather is David Rockefeller.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that, but I knew there was some,
It wasn't just some college kid who got bored and invented something. I don't particularly believe that story when you consider who his grandfather was.
Wow.
I did not know that. Figures. Well, good night, all.
We'll be back on Thursday, and Jason will be back, too. Not Thursday, but soon.
Hi, Jason.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody in chat. Bye.